Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Now I know what you're thinking, stupidly long video for an introduction to a game, and I want to start the video off by saying that an hour or so long video is in no way required to pick up the game and play. You can go in and have fun without knowing anything extra, but there were quite a few things I wish I knew about the game going into it that I feel would have made the experience better, and that's what this video is for. I've split the video up into segments, so if you already have the bare bones basics of the UI and matchmaking, feel free to skip to the later segments for some more advanced tips. Timestamps will be on the screen now. This video is also for people who've never picked up the game at all and haven't even seen the tutorial yet, and because of this I will lightly be going over aspects of the game brought up in the tutorial so people who haven't had a chance to go through it yet don't miss out on any information, although I will be as brief as I can on repeating subjects. Also, of course, there are going to be a few things I'm going to be missing out that I do want to talk about. This video has already taken too long already, so some things are sadly going to have to be left out, although I will be updating the description of this video with some more useful information over time. Additionally, most of the tips in this video will mainly be geared towards the realistic battle mode, so keep this in mind too. So, let's get started. Grab yourself a drink, and as always, I really hope you enjoy. Right, let's quickly cover War Thunder's currency. Obviously there's premium currency and standard currency. The latter is Silver Lions, or SL, and is earned in all battles for player actions. Kills, assists, captures, and of course, the amount you earn is increased if you win a match. SL can also additionally be earned through completing orders and wages, and provided you fulfill the requirements, you can make a decent amount of money. SL is used to buy all mainline content in the game, new tanks, planes, ships, crewing them, and buying upgrade modules for vehicles. The premium currency is Golden Eagles, or GE. With this you can buy pretty much anything in the game. You can speed up research, buy upgrade modules instantly, buy ace crews, crew slots, camos, decals, premium time, but mostly for buying premium vehicles. GE can be earned in-game in rather small amounts. There are occasionally events that allow you to earn GE by completing tasks, or you can activate a golden wager. These are earned through the huge crates that drop after a few weeks of logging into the game consecutively. They're best attempted in a group though, as the most common one, an officer wager, requires you to win 20 matches in a row, allowing for only 3 losses. Though you do earn 1000 G at the end of it all, which isn't bad at all. Next is Research Points, or RP. RP is required to unlock new vehicles and modules, and like Silver Lions, is earned through random battles, and again, the amount you earn is relative to the actions you take in battle, kills, caps, etc. RP is boosted immensely through premium vehicles, boosters, and the premium account as well. Generally, RB and simulator modes give more RP per battle over arcade, but as arcade matches don't last as long, the amount you earn is close to equal over the modes, but on pure time efficiency and consistency, arcade is probably the best option to grind and get the most RP per battle. Next we have Talismans. These can be purchased with Golden Eagles and can be bought for any tech tree vehicle in the game. As the description says, these allow you to earn double RP for all battle actions, and the price scales with the BR of the vehicle. So this essentially turns any mainline vehicle into a premium, but without the double Silver Lion bonus. Talismans also can randomly drop from battle trophies, but this is quite rare, and they do more commonly drop in low tier matches and high tier matches. They also go on sale at War Thunder's anniversary event at half price, and generally they're well worth picking up if you enjoy playing a particular tech tree vehicle, as the price of a talisman tier for tier undercuts the cost of a premium vehicle by quite a lot in some cases. They are as well a really cost effective way to grind out top tier, so if you put a talisman on a tier 5 or a tier 6, you'll be saving around €30, but do bear in mind you won't be earning any additional Silver Lions this way. At the left of any tech tree, you'll see the vehicles are divided into ranks, 1 to 6 for tanks, and for now, 1 to 5 for aircraft. A vehicle's rank has nothing to do with the matchmaking the vehicle will receive, and currently, the only prevalence the ranks have in game is to make sure that you have to unlock a certain amount of vehicles of a rank to progress to the next one. Now this is mainly to stop a player going down a single tree very quickly and getting to a high tier vehicle where they wouldn't have a balanced lineup, or their skill level is too inadequate to adjust to the high tier gameplay when they're just getting started. Ranks also dictate how tanks research other tanks. All main tech tree tanks can research effectively 1 rank up and 1 rank down, including their own rank, so a tier 3 can research tier 2, 3 and 4 effectively. Premiums, however, can research effectively 1 rank up and all ranks beneath it, so a tier 5 premium can research all ranks effectively. You can still research a vehicle outside of this range, but the RP towards it will be greatly reduced. You can't research a Leo 2A4 with a Panzer III effectively, for example. Next is quite possibly the most important thing to get familiar with when you start the game, and that's BR, or Battle Rating. This is the decimal number displayed next to every vehicle icon and goes from 1.0 to 10.0 currently. The vehicles you start the tech tree with are reserve vehicles and don't display a BR, but they all function as 1.0, as you can see in the stat card. Now, Battle Rating is important as it decides the matchmaking your game will have. The matchmaker can put you into a game up to one battle rating above the highest battle rating vehicle in your lineup, or one rating below. So, if your highest battle rating vehicle is 3.7, you could be put into a match where the range of vehicles goes from 2.7 to 3.7, where you're top tier, or 3.7 to 4.7, where you're bottom tier, or just somewhere in the middle. This is the case for every mode except Simulator, which we'll get into in a bit. Next up is premium vehicles. Now, I won't be talking about particular good or bad premiums in this section, just about how they work and how best to choose one that's right for you. Premiums allow for you to earn double RP and Lions and more upgrade points for your crews, but we'll get into that in a bit. The grind is made a lot easier with a premium. There are a few types of premiums in the game: Golden Eagle premiums, which are buyable in game with Golden Eagles, bundle premiums, which can be bought for real money on the Gaijin store, and there's giveaway premiums, which can be earned through events. All of these, though, work exactly the same in regards to the rewards you'll earn while playing them, but the higher tier premiums give a higher reward. You can check this number by looking at the percentage at the bottom of the stat card here. But this doesn't make the higher tier premiums better intrinsically. Like I mentioned earlier, premiums can effectively research all vehicles of the ranks below it and one rank above it, but that doesn't make the highest tier premiums the obvious choice, especially if you start the game, buy a top tier premium right away. You'll be put in with players who generally know the game a lot better than you, have better crews, better map knowledge, etc. So I wouldn't recommend this unless you're only interested in playing top tier. What makes a premium great is the trifecta of effectiveness, versatility, and fun. Ultimately, the best kind of premium is one that you'll enjoy playing. Some are just versatile and effective though, which still makes for a great vehicle. Ultimately, it's a choice you as a player need to make. A premium like the Brumbar, for example, is a really fun tank. It never gets old splatting anything you see with a huge HE round, but it's very hard to aim and incredibly challenging to use on large maps. So you're not going to be able to grind as effectively with it as you would, for example, the Command Panzer IV. Not an amazing vehicle by any means, but it's going to be effective on all maps with the gun it has. What you're going to want generally from a premium is one that's always going to work and isn't going to get shafted when it's bottom tier, and usually one that has an asset that doesn't get negated by the map or BR you're playing at. For the Panzer IV, it's the gun that's always effective. Something like the M18 Black Cat, it's the mobility. I'll go into specific premiums later when we look at the trees, but for now keep this in mind when you're choosing one for the future. Next is the Warbond shop. This is War Thunder's way to earn premium content for free, but to get the good stuff it does take a fair bit of grinding. You can get to the Warbond shop like this by clicking on a daily task, and the bottom right button here takes you to the shop itself. At the bottom you can see a bar with levels on it. Each task you complete progresses the bar. At every new level, more items come available to purchase. Different items get added every month, so give it a look yourself. At the low end you have boosters, universal backups and test drives. At the high end you have premium vehicles. These reset every month and you can occasionally find some fantastic, really effective vehicles this way. So how does it work? Well, it revolves around these nifty coloured rectangles. These are your Warbonds. You can earn up to 180 a day by completing 2 random tasks, and you can swap them out for Silver Lions, though if you want a different one. Warbonds also don't expire at the end of the month, so you keep all the ones you earn unless you spend them. The next factor are these special task medals. You can earn as many of them as you like, but they do reset at the end of the month. They can be earned by buying a special task from the Warbond shop for 30 Warbonds. And bear in mind, these tasks are usually quite difficult and time consuming, so if you are going for a premium vehicle which costs 12 medals, make sure you have the time to dedicate to earn them all. War Thunder externally does offer organised tournaments where you can win some pretty great prizes. Usually on offer are boosters, premium time, golden eagles and titles, but occasionally for some of the bigger tournaments you can win rare skins and decals, and sometimes some very rare vehicles too. When you're confident enough, I recommend giving tournaments a go. There's a decent flow of general 1v1 matchups, and if you finish even in the top 8 you'll receive a pretty decent premium booster. Also, keep an eye out for the renewal of Thunder League. This was an organised and sponsored esports league for the game, and allowed for players not even in tournaments to win some pretty brilliant prizes. It's uncertain yet whether it'll come about again, but if it does, make sure to give it some attention and advocate for a Season 2 if you get the opportunity. Tournaments aren't for everyone, but if you're interested in giving them a go, the address to enter one is tss.warthunder.com. Lastly, another external site is the War Thunder Marketplace, which can be reached by clicking here in the menu or by heading over manually to trade.gaijin.net. Mostly the marketplace deals in skins you can buy with real money, sort of. You pay for a currency called Gaijin Coin, which you can then exchange for any asset on the marketplace or use on the Gaijin store to buy premiums or GE. Generally though, I would avoid the marketplace. It's a lot like a loot box system, a bit similar to CSGO's system, where you can buy keys and things, and right now it's not really worth it. You can sometimes pick up cheap premiums though after events, so if I were you I'd check it from time to time, but ultimately avoid it for anything else. So, now we've covered all the basics, let's get on to the game itself. Tank battles in War Thunder are, in my opinion, some of the most fun, varied vehicle combat I've ever played in a game, and Anton isn't holding a gun to my head making me say that. Unlike other similar games, War Thunder Ground Forces offers an unparalleled variety in the vehicles you can play, from famous tanks we all know and love to prototypes and, uniquely, even anti-air guns and ATGM carriers. All of these vehicles play a part in battles, taking advantage of different locations and countering other types of vehicles. And for me at least, it's just such a nice experience from starting from a 30s light tank like the M2A4 and grinding your way up to the M1 Abrams. In this section, I'll be going over the fundamentals of tank combat, a run through of the modes you can play, types of rounds to use, how different types of vehicles work in battle, and tips to get the most out of the controls, and some lesser known tips and tricks as well, so you start just a step ahead of the competition. So, the fundamentals of tank combat in War Thunder. Well, it's a little more in depth than other examples you might have seen. Each module in a vehicle plays a part and can be destroyed, and your vehicle's crew can also be individually knocked out. To get good at tank battles ultimately is to know the most effective way on how to disable a vehicle, be it crew or critical components. For example, taking out an enemy vehicle's breach will mean it can't fire, take out the aiming drives and the gun can't traverse, etc. The same applies to crew as well. Take out the loader and it'll take longer for the tank to fire. Take out the driver and the vehicle is immobilized for a short while the remaining crew swap seats. All ground vehicles can function with only 2 crew members remaining and will default to the gunner and driver position. Lose either one of these though and the tank is considered knocked out. All destroyed or damaged parts in your vehicle can be repaired as long as you have the parts unlocked. Losing a certain number of operational components will not contribute to the vehicle being taken out. This can only be achieved by knocking out all the crew or by blowing up the vehicle's ammo rack or fuel tanks. The only vehicles that have different criteria for destruction are lightly armoured vehicles and trucks, which use a mechanic called hull break. This generally applies to vehicles with 30mm or less of armour. However, reserve tier tanks are exempt from this rule and don't hull break. To break the hull of a vehicle like this, you'll have to hit the breech or engine with a large caliber armour piercing shot or hit the tank anywhere with heat or HE munitions. These have to be over a caliber of 75mm, however heat is much more likely to trigger a hull break than HE, unless the caliber is quite high. HE can be quite inconsistent in this regard. So next, let's have a look at the different modes available for you to play. Tank Arcade is the best way to start the game. Compared to Realistic, all ground vehicles move faster and more responsive, and you'll see enemy nameplates above hostiles as well. You go into every battle with a set of 3 respawns in any type of vehicle. Additionally, unlike other modes, you have a penetration indicator in your gun sight. Green for a certain penetration, yellow for a possible, and red for no penetration. It also turns grey when a penetration can't be ascertained, and the indicator does disappear at range as well. There are also kill streaks of sorts. After 1, 2 or 3 kills respectively, you can join an air battle in a fighter, start one in an attacker or bomber. This allows you to fire plane into the ongoing ground battle and perform close air support on enemy tanks. Be careful though, as enemy players can take up fighters against you to try and stop you from getting to the battlefield. Bombers usually, surprise surprise, carry bombs, attackers can carry a mix of bombs and rockets, and fighters carry no ordnance at all, but can take out some open-topped, lightly armoured ground vehicles. Taking out aircraft presents a good opportunity to dig out tanks in well-protected positions, clear out a capture point, or take out tanks in a cluster. Additionally, the aircraft you get given are random and tied to the tier. You can't bring out your own aircraft to arcade. Additionally, in AB you can fire with a broken breech or barrel. If your breech is knocked out, there's a chance you won't fire and have to reload the round, but you can still use it. For your barrel, you can still fire as well, but the accuracy and penetration will be drastically reduced. You can also drive without your engine or transmission, but slower, traverse your drives when they're knocked out, but again, slower. Arcade is quite forgiving in this respect, so despite heavily preferring RB myself, I recommend you stick with this mode until you have the basics down. It's good for stock tanks as well, as not having the upgrades is less of a detriment in this mode. Arcade heavily benefits heavily armoured brawling tanks. As everyone is lit up on the map, armour is a lot more important. So tanks with little to no armour do very poorly in Arcade, as there's no opportunity for them to flank unseen. Also, as soon as a plane comes in and sees an open top tank, they can easily strafe and knock you out. These sorts of vehicles do a lot better in realistic and simulator modes. In Tank Assault, you and your team will be fighting AI tanks advancing to your base, and you need to stop them from getting into your cap circle, otherwise you'll start losing tickets. The tanks you'll see depend on the map and BR other vehicles you take with you. If you hover over the Tank Assault icon, it will show you the BR brackets that dictate what tanks you'll fight, so creating a varied lineup here is key. But you can just play one single tank, as respawns are unlimited, but you will have to pay Silver Lions to respawn in a tank you've already taken out. Additionally to this, ammo is free in this mode. The AI on bots is questionable at best, to be honest, as it just seems to be luck whether you get shot or not. The bots can fire perfectly on the move, and sometimes you can't even see the shells in flight, so it's best to stick behind cover and take something heavily armoured at the higher end of the BR bracket you're choosing. Tanks with quick reloads also do very well here. The matches here usually last around 25 minutes, and at the higher BRs, if you win, you'll earn a pretty decent amount of RP, but if you lose, you will earn very little. Also, your first match every day gives you a free RP or Lion booster. The size of the booster depends on how long you last, and if you finish a match, you can earn up to a 300% booster for free. The mode can get a little bit repetitive, but it's a pretty decent way to test out new vehicles you're not quite confident with yet. I personally use Tank Assault to grind out parts and FP for tanks before taking them out into proper matches sometimes if the vehicle's particularly tricky. And I recommend you do this too if you're not comfortable taking out a tank stock. Tank Realistic functions very differently from Tank Arcade, and in my opinion is the most fun out of all the modes. In Tank RV, enemies have no markers or nameplates above them and move at their historical speed, and unlike Arcade, if you lose an internal module it will cease all functionality until you repair it. Team composition isn't quite historical most of the time, but each nation is limited to one team, so you won't have Germany fighting Germany or Russia fighting Russia. It is usually Axis v Allies, but you'll still commonly see Germany, Russia and France versus the UK and America. Sometimes there are mixed battles with all nations fighting each other, but this is quite rare most of the time. Now RB functions on spawn points. You start the game with 450 and each vehicle you spawn in costs a certain amount. Bear in mind though, the amount each tank costs has recently changed and may change again in the future. The amount of spawn points a vehicle costs is relative to the BR you're playing at. If you're in a 6.7 to 5.7 game and you're playing all 6.7 vehicles, they'll cost the maximum amount. 5.7 and below though will cost the minimum amount. Each integer of 0.3 in the battle rating will change the cost. Bear in mind, after respawning, the cost for a regular tank is increased by the initial cost. So if you spawn in a 100 spawn point tank, it'll then become 200, then 300, etc. Currently, no matter the BR, planes will always require more spawn points than what you start with. You can, however, spawn some early helicopters at the higher BRs off the bat, provided they don't have any AGMs. Nearly every action in game gives you spawn points. Getting kills, assists, caps, even just getting hits or scoring hits gives you points. You should be aiming to maximise your spawn points passively while you play, and going for things like the early cap point is a great way to secure some extra spawns. Powerful units like bombers, attackers and fighter bombers are great for taking out tanks and for spotting for your team, but there is a risk in doing this. If you bank all your spawn points on taking out an attacker for example and die without doing anything, you'd have lost about 2 potential spawns in ground vehicles. Provided you have a varied lineup with lots of options, look at your team composition and map before you spawn. If you get taken out and spawn in a plane right away without looking, you might find that most of your team is in planes with only a few friendly tanks left, unable to hold their ground. It's important to see what your team needs. Lots of hostile aircraft up, take SPA. The team's doing well in holding the line, spawn something quick to get back up there faster. Clear skies, take an attacker. Understanding this dynamic is really important for maximising your effectiveness. Another important thing to know is your pace and where your vehicle excels. You don't always need to rush into the middle of the map or cap to be effective. This advice goes for all modes, but especially in RB. Don't be too aggressive. Your Tiger might be a great tank, but it's not invincible, and playing like it is will definitely get you knocked out. Also, have patience. I can't tell you how many engagements I've won just by being patient. If you and another tank are having a standoff and you're not at risk of getting flanked, just wait, they will get bored. Trust me. Finally, playing with a friend more familiar to RB can be really helpful when you transition over. They can tell you what you're doing wrong and what to improve on. So, I'd recommend joining some War Thunder Discords if you don't know anyone who plays already. Tank Simulator can be great fun, and offers a limited but engaging matchmaker in that there's no up tiers or down tiers. Each day there are 2 simulator events that alternate around midday, where there are set lists of vehicles to choose from and play. Only the vehicles on the roster for each particular day can be taken out. The spawns here work differently to the other modes as well. SPAA tank destroyers, medium tanks and light tanks get 2 spawns each, whereas heavy tanks and heavy tank destroyers like the Ferdinand and T-95 get 1 spawn. You can also take out a single aircraft as well. Choose the vehicle you want to play carefully though, as after you spawn in a vehicle you're locked to only taking out that particular one. This means you can't spawn a light tank and then switch to a different vehicle after you've taken it out the first time. As for gameplay changes, your view is a lot more limited. You're stuck to the cupola view on every vehicle, so no third person camera tricks. On top of this, the gun now has parallax, so when looking down the sights, they're in their historical position, so you need to compensate for the position of the gun. And this does take a little bit of getting used to on certain tanks, especially ones that have roof mounted optics. There are also no friendly markers, so I recommend getting used to which nation's tanks are which before going in so you don't accidentally team kill, as friendly fire is on in this mode. Sim, in my opinion, is best enjoyed with a group of friends working together. A good sim squad can absolutely wreak havoc on an uncoordinated team. Additionally, the rewards are pretty great, so give it a go when you feel up to it. It's well worth a try. Next, let's look at the upgrade modules you can unlock for your tanks. These are the unlockable modules on the Panzer II-C tank as an example. All the upgrades apart from these 2 round upgrades here are consistent on pretty much every tank apart from a rare few. Most of the upgrades are self-explanatory, so we'll go over them quite quickly. Let's start with the protection modules. First here we have parts. Parts allow you to repair your tank in battle, and without this upgrade you can't repair damaged components in your tank unless you park on a friendly capture point. And if I were you, I would always go for this one first. Next is FPE. Fire prevention equipment, and this obviously allows for you to put out fires in your tank. You can extinguish up to 2 fires with this upgrade, and without it you can't extinguish any, so definitely go for this one quick as well. The third upgrade here is crew replenishment. This allows for you to replenish 1 crew member from a cap point in RB and Sim, or anywhere in arcade. This one isn't massively important as it's quite situational, and while you have crew replenishment and you're using it, your tank is stuck still, so it makes you quite vulnerable. It's quite nice to have, but not essential in any way. Next, let's look at the mobility upgrades. They're all pretty straightforward apart from the first one here, which is tracks. On the stat card here, it only states that it increases the damage the tracks can take before they get taken out. But there's a benefit much greater than this that isn't mentioned anywhere, and it makes tracks one of the most vital mobility upgrades. Tracks allow for your tank to traverse a lot quicker, as I'll show on screen now. It's such a huge boost to a tank's traverse, and it's a shame the game doesn't mention this directly, as I think a lot of people would have missed out on this upgrade and largely skip over it. It also makes your traverse a lot better on hills, and without this upgrade your tank's tracks tend to just slide all over the place, so this is possibly one of the most important mobility upgrades you can get. Next is suspension, which helps with gun stability on the move. Not a crucial upgrade in any means, but it does help on certain vehicles. Ultimately though, not one to prioritise. Next is brakes, which again doesn't really need much explaining. This just makes your tank's brakes more effective in the general force and the distance it takes to stop. This is more important on the more speedy vehicles, but again, not really one to prioritise. The last 3 here are your main mobility upgrades: filters, transmission and engine. These all increase your general mobility, speed and acceleration. Engine offers the best increase across the board, so this is the one you should be prioritising. Lastly, onto firepower. The things that remain consistent for all tanks apart from 1 or 2 is horizontal drive, adjustment of fire and fire elevation mechanism. Horizontal drive increases your turret's horizontal movement, the elevation mechanism increases your gun's vertical movement and accuracy in the vertical as well, so the spread of fire is lessened. But the main one to prioritise here is adjustment of fire. This increases the gun's accuracy across the board vertically and horizontally. Not having this mod can prove to be a real problem at range, as on some guns the inaccuracy is really noticeable, and proves especially annoying on tanks with long reloads, so again, this is definitely one to prioritise. There are a few other mods specific to other vehicles like rangefinders, smoke grenades, engine smoke systems and artillery for light, medium and SPA vehicles, but these are pretty self-explanatory. Excluding tank specific mods though, this is the order of research I take on most vehicles. Right, now that's out of the way, let's look at the types of shells in game and how they work. Firstly, let's start off with armor-piercing, high-explosive rounds, mainly because compared generally to all other round types caliber by caliber, APHE is the most effective round in the game. It penetrates armor, then explodes, damaging all internal components around it. This allows for the most effective damage output radius and should always be prioritized, apart from a few tanks that have very poor APHE, but this is quite rare. APHE rounds come in a few variations: normal APHE, APC, APHE-BC, and APC-BC. I know that's a lot of letters to take in, but don't worry, they all function exactly the same in the game in that they all penetrate and explode. The latter rounds, though, are capped, and in terms of the game, this means that the rounds have an easier time penning sloped armor, and generally APC-BC rounds perform the best overall, followed by APHE-BC and APC, then APHE. So, APC-BC is generally the best choice, but bear in mind the HE filler in all the rounds. All rounds have a different TNT equivalent, and the higher the TNT content, the more damage the round will do. So even though APC-BC might have the highest penetration, it might not always do the most damage, but in my opinion, your safest bet is always with the APC-BC round most of the time. Next is Armor Piercing, which is arguably the most general round in the game. AP simply is a solid shot round, so it penetrates armor and generates shrapnel in the direction the round enters the vehicle. The higher the caliber, the more shrapnel. Some of the larger caliber AP rounds do a lot of damage, and in some cases even a little bit more than APHE, but this is almost exclusively to 120mm or above. However, for smaller calibers, AP is almost always secondary to APHE, as it's just less likely to disable a tank in a single shot. Now, AP has different shell types as well, just like APHE, there's APC, APC-BC, etc., but the icon backgrounds are different. AP, despite having the same shell icons, lose the explosion effect behind the shell, but they follow the same rules as the previous rounds regarding their effectiveness against slopes. The AP spooling doesn't change with the type of cap on the round as well, as it's just down to weight and caliber. AP does generally have more penetration than APHE on the same gun, so even though APHE is the best choice for actually disabling tanks, it's always a good idea just to carry a few AP rounds just in case you meet something heavily armoured that your APHE might struggle a little bit with. Next up is APCR. APCR sacrifices a lot of damage potential for a lot of penetration power and is absolutely rubbish against sloped armor, and in most cases can't pen any sloping at all. APCR is possibly the worst conventional round in the game. Its versatility is very, very low and is only useful in penetrating heavily armoured flat armour, but it's honestly never really used for that anyway. Thinking about it, there's no instance in my recent games where I've needed APCR. I carry a few rounds myself just in case, but I never really use it. So just stick with APHE and AP and avoid this one, but you might as well keep a couple in reserve just in case. You might need it one day. Next is just a quick mention in shrapnel. Now these are only found on the early Soviet 76mm guns on tanks like the T-28 and T-26-4. They basically just function as powerful, low pen APHE rounds with a fancy icon, and apart from that there's not really much else to say. Next is Heat, Heat-FS and Heat-AT. These are chemical rounds and they all function exactly the same in the game. Heat-FS is a fin-stabilized version found on later tanks, and Heat-AT is a round only found on recoilless rifles and the BMP-1, so the damage output, like the other rounds, is only relative to the TNT equivalent. Heat carries the same penetration at all ranges, so unlike other rounds, you have the same effectiveness at any distance. The downside though is that these rounds have quite low muzzle velocity compared to most other rounds, so they're a bit harder to aim at range. On top of this, rounds can get stopped by things like fences and bushes, trees, all forms of cover really, so be careful when using this in towns and forests. Heat also almost always destroys a tank when it hits the ammo. Other rounds can just black the ammo rack out, this doesn't detonate it and just means the vehicle loses some of its available ammunition to fire. Heat is a very good round for disabling tanks, but again it is secondary to APHE. But if you have the option, taking a bit of both is your best bet and allows you to be a lot more versatile against tanks you fight. Let's use the Panzer IV-E for example. The APHE round is very damaging but doesn't have a lot of penetration, but the Heat does. So taking a bit of both allows you to easily dispatch lightly armoured targets while being able to swap to the Heat for the more tricky tanks. Heat also almost guarantees a hull break as well, so it's always good to carry a couple just to deal with the anti-air trucks or M18s or any light tanks you might come across. Next is High Explosive. HE has basically no effect on enemy armour unless the caliber is high enough. This generally is anything over 120mm, and even then you need to land a pretty precise hit either underneath the tank or the bottom of the tank's turret so the explosion moves down into the hull. HE is a very destructive round if you land it right, but it shouldn't really ever be used as a main round, unless you're using a KV-2, the HORO, etc., where the caliber is 150mm or over. If your caliber of gun is 75mm or larger, I'd recommend taking at least 1 or 2 HE rounds for shooting at hull breakable vehicles, and mainly AA, as it's hard to one-shot them with some AP rounds. But bear in mind that only calibers of 120mm or over work reliably. The lower caliber rounds tend to be a little bit iffy with some hull breakable vehicles. On top of this, if you're taking HE to deal with light vehicles, if your tank has heat available, always use that instead. But anyway, if your gun's caliber is less than 75mm, there's absolutely no reason really to take out any HE rounds. Next up we have Hesh. Now Hesh is dedicated to the later tiers and is a very powerful, if unreliable, round. Hesh carries the same penetration over all ranges and actually gains penetration at angles, so it can pen some really nutty shots. Pen isn't really the right word though, as what Hesh does is explode on the outside of the armour and force a scab of metal on the inside of the tank to break off and force shrapnel through the crew compartment. Hesh is mainly found on the 105mm L7 gun, the British 120 and the 106mm recoilless rifle. It's much more powerful on the latter two and is a little bit underwhelming on the 105. Hesh though can easily one-shot vehicles if placed right, but the fuse sensitivity is very low, so if it hits side skirts, tracks or any additional armour, the round won't do anything at all, so take your shots very carefully. I'd take Hesh out as a secondary round, as you can easily run into a vehicle that you can't actually damage, especially on the L7 gun. For the 106mm recoilless rifles that are only equipped with Hesh and heat, always take out Hesh as it performs so much better than the heat they have. Gaijin do however keep changing and adjusting how Hesh actually performs, so keep up with the news to see if they make any changes, but right now it's still a pretty decent round. While we're on Hesh though, I think it's a good idea to mention the percentage chance in pen variation. All rounds in the game are subject to up to a 10% variance in how much penetration they can achieve. This can be 10% extra penetration on their base amount or 10% below their base amount. But for Hesh, this chance is up to 20%, which can be quite a lot if you think about it. So keep this in mind if your round sometimes doesn't quite do the damage you think it should be doing. Next up is Sabo. Now this is basically APCR but with a much better slope modifier, and like APCR the damage output is quite low, but tier for tier it does have a lot of penetration. Outside of tier 5 and upwards, the only place you're really going to be finding Sabo is the British tree, so starting at 5.0 with the Comet. Sabo isn't a fantastic round performance wise, as currently it does do very little damage, but from what the data miners have found, the more residual pen a Sabo round has, the more shrapnel it will make. What this generally means is that the thinner the armour you shoot, the more shrapnel the round will make, so keep this in mind while shooting. Generally though, as your round doesn't have much damage potential, you're going to want to shoot to disable the gunner or breach first, allowing you to safely pick off the rest of the crew without retaliation. Also, Sabo does have a pretty high chance to set off an ammo rack, but it's not 100% reliable, so bear this in mind too. Sabo is a good backup round for heavily armoured tanks, but taking other rounds like AP or Heat FS, which is usually found in tandem with Sabo on the later tanks, is usually the better option as their damage potential is a lot higher. Next is Armour Piercing Fin Stabilised discarding Sabo, APF SDS or just darts. The round is reserved for the much higher tiers and sports incredible penetration. So it performs basically the same as Sabo but better in every way. Creates a huge amount of spalling damage, can pen even the most extreme angles, and also almost consistently detonates ammo as well, making this generally the most consistent high performance round in the game. It does absolutely everything well. High velocity, high damage, high pen, almost all top tier tanks use darts, so you have this round to look forward to when you get there. Next are ATGMs, anti-tank guided missiles, and all of them have different pen values and speeds, but function basically as guided heat rounds in the game. There are two types of aiming systems for ATGMs, hand aiming and semi-automatic. Hand aim ATGMs are controlled with the keyboard WASD controls for movement, which makes them a little bit tricky to use. These controls are for the early generation ATGMs at the lower BRs. The higher tier ATGM systems use semi-automatic aiming, which is basically mouse aim. You point at a target and the ATGM will follow, so they're a lot easier to use. ATGMs are most functional at longer ranges, as at close range it's pretty easy to miss. Additionally, a lot of ATGM vehicles are incapable of firing at targets directly in front of them, so long range or behind cover is the way to go. Lastly, we have smoke, which probably requires no explanation at all really. These create a cloud of smoke when they hit a target or strike a surface. Not much really else to add apart from that, other than the larger the caliber, the longer lasting the smoke screen. Additionally, the rounds do basically nothing to other armoured vehicles, although you can hassle trucks and lightly armoured tanks, but it's not really worth it. Next is something very important to your and your vehicle's performance, and that's crew points. You can find this by hovering over a vehicle in one of your crew slots and clicking crew. Each slot has a different crew you'll have to level up separately. These aren't tied to the vehicle. Any tank you put into any particular crew slot will share the same level. So for each of the crew members available, there are a few specific crew points unique to them, but the top 4 here are consistent for all of them. Keen Vision, Agility, Field Repair and Vitality. The most important one out of these, in my opinion, is Vitality and can really make a difference. If you play a tank with no Vitality, then play one with max Vitality, you'll definitely notice the change. Next is Agility and Field Repair. I'd say these two are about equal in terms of priority. Field Repair decreases the time it takes for your crew to repair your tank, and Agility is the speed at which your crew members swap out or one of them gets knocked out. The commander replacing the gunner when you lose him, for example. These are both overall skills for all of your crew members, so as you upgrade Agility across the board, the swap time is the same for all crew, same with Field Repair. They're both pretty important skills to level up, as either one can save you in various situations. Maybe you get your breach taken out, you back up behind cover and start repairing while an enemy tank is driving towards you. With a higher repair skill, you might be able to repair before he gets to you and be able to finish him off. Alternatively, for agility, you might be dueling with a tank with a longer reload, he takes out your gunner, but because you have a high agility skill, you can get your gunner back before the tank reloads and take him out. Because of how inconsistent these situations are in matches, I can't really say which skill should be prioritised. I'd lean on the side of field repair though, as repairing your tank is certainly a lot more common and helps you get back into the fight quicker. Lastly, for the general skills, is a pretty vague one in Keen Vision. This again is an overall skill and mainly just applies to arcade from what I can see. It speeds up the tank's nameplate popping in when poking out from behind a corner or whatever, which is quite useful in arcade as you're expecting a nameplate. If you don't see one, you're not going to react quick enough to take the tank out. In RB, it only has a few uses. It dictates the range at which enemy tanks are detected, but this is a very long range, and most maps don't have the lines of sight where this skill would actually matter. It's a bit vague on how it ultimately works outside of arcade, but from testing it, this is the only factor largely present in RB. It does help flag planes coming in though, which I'll get into near the end. But if you're looking to play RB in Sim, this is probably the last skill you want to level up. Next are the unique skills for each crew member. For the driver, it's tank driving. This shortens the time it takes for a tank to brake to a full stop, and the speed at which the driver changes gears automatically. Next are the gunner's skills, and these are targeting and range finding. Targeting is the speed at which your gunner traverses the gun where you're pointing. The more experienced the skill, the faster and more efficiently it'll move. On a less experienced crew, the gun will traverse horizontally and vertically separately, but when you upgrade it, it will move diagonally as well. Rangefinding is the accuracy of your tank's rangefinder, as well as the speed at which you'll acquire range. I'll go into how that works a bit later. Next is the commander, which has a leadership. This simply upgrades all other skills for the other crews up to 10% while the commander is active. Next is the loader, which has quite an important one, weapon reloading, which increases the speed at which your gun reloads. This, in my opinion, is the most important skill to go for right away, as you'll undoubtedly find yourself in engagements where having a faster reload would have saved you. Lastly is the radio operator / machine gunner. He has 3 skills, 2 of which are in relation to the artillery upgrade. The first one here reduces the radius of your strike, making it more accurate to a smaller spot, and the latter speeds up the time it takes for your artillery to get called in. The last one here is a bit vague, radio communication. In arcade, this increases the range at which enemy tanks appear on the minimap that are in the line of sight of your teammates. In RB, this increases the range at which you can detect enemy tanks that have been pinged on the map by your teammates, and also what type of tank it is as well. Past a certain distance, you'll see a marker on the map for a tank that's been hit, but not the icon of the type. So that's a brief rundown of the crew skills. As for what I'd recommend, on screen now is the general order I upgrade my crews in. Before we move on, I'll cover Expert and Ace crews quickly in the qualification tab. These increase the skills past what you can normally upgrade with points. An Expert crew is silver, and you can buy it with silver lions, and an Ace crew is gold, and surprisingly, you can buy it with gold. This gives you more points across the board. You'll reload faster, turn quicker, etc. And in my opinion, if you can afford it, all tanks are worth experting. Ace crews alternatively can be earned in-game for free and are grinded out with RP passively, but it takes a bloody long time, especially with premiums. So if you really like a vehicle, it's worth putting an Ace crew on it. Additionally, the price does go down the more RP you earn, so keep an eye on it if you want a discount. First, let's start off with the most common tank type, and also the most versatile in medium tanks. These tanks can really function in any way, but generally they're a mix of everything. Decent armor, decent gun, and decent mobility. Medium tanks don't get anything completely unique to the class, but they do get artillery strikes, though these are shared with light tanks and SPAA. Mediums are the backbone of any lineup really, as they can work well on almost all maps and all environments, and are great at doing pretty much anything. The class is like a jack of all trades almost. You can cap, flank, snipe. Obviously some vehicles are better at doing these things than others, but almost every medium tank is good at something. But they're so varied, it'd be disingenuous of me to pigeonhole them into one particular niche or playstyle, but they definitely are crucial to have in any lineup, as they offer a lot more playstyles and a lot more versatility. Next up we have heavies, which don't really have anything unique to their class upgrade wise, but tier for tier they're some of the most dangerous tanks on the battlefield and are usually, surprisingly, the most heavily armoured as well. For this they sacrifice mobility, but are usually armed with a very good gun, which makes them prime targets, especially in RB where they cost the most spawn points, and in Sim where they only have a single spawn. Heavies are best played in RB at least when they're top tier, where their armour is going to be the most effective. Otherwise they're just going to become slow medium tanks, and you're going to want to get the most use out of them as they do cost the most spawn points. Heavies can be absolutely devastating if used right, but they're usually dependent on the BR and map as to how effective they actually are. Next are light tanks, which functionally are quite unique. These tanks are generally fast and lightly armoured, and in terms of the game include standard light tanks, IFVs and armoured cars, and some of the later ones have some very dangerous guns as well. The main feature is that these tanks can scout, so if you see an enemy tank you can hit the scout key to light them up on the map so all the friendlies can see their position. You get lines for doing this, and you get RP if the tank you've scouted gets killed by a friendly. In RB this lets you spawn in planes a lot quicker by reducing the RP requirement to spawn in them. So despite them being quite easy to kill and quite lightly armoured, they can be quite dangerous if you get a flank on, and if the opportunity isn't there, you can play passively and help the team out by scouting. Light tanks can also help repair other friendly tanks, and you get a small lion reward for doing this as well. They function very well as supports in the game, but if you're more into sneaky play you'll have a lot of fun with light tanks. They work great in up tiers as well, as their speed effectiveness will not lessen at a higher BR, so they succeed where heavies fall in this regard. And in my opinion it's always good to have at least one of these in your lineup. Next is tank destroyers, and in the game these include SPGs and ATGM carriers as well. Generally they have a drawback and an advantage. This can be great mobility for no armour, great gun with no armour, lots of armour with no mobility, etc. And this allows the class to be pretty fun and diverse, as they can fit nicely into a lot of lineups. In up tiers as well, the spawn cost for TDs is very low, and you can take advantage of the tanks with good guns and good mobility very cheaply, as the mobility and firepower will remain effective even in up tier. The main drawback to tank destroyers is that they're generally turretless, which limits their versatility on some maps. So they're best played in spots that are hard to flank, so engaging at range or at the end of streets isn't a bad idea. TDs can be very effective but require a bit more spatial awareness to play, as they're not really as adaptable in combat as other vehicles, but their variating playstyle makes them a very fun type to play and great to pad your lineups with to cater to the wide variety of maps and positions. Next is SPA. Now these are anti-air guns, which obviously are designed to take out planes, but they can also hassle tanks in game as well, especially ones with light armour. There are two almost unwritten types of anti-air guns in the game really. Anti-air that are only good at shooting down planes, and then anti-air that can prove a big problem for tanks. Now the former only have weakly penning AP rounds, if any at all, while the latter can carry AP, HVAP, APCR, and the later ones even SOBO, which does give them some adaptability on the battlefield when there's no planes to shoot at. Some of these, like the ZSU-57-2 and the Kugelblitz, can basically function as light tanks if you use the AP rounds on them. Additionally, if they can't pen the front armour, they can easily take out a tank's barrel and their tracks, which allow the team to take out the vehicle safely, or for you to flank them and get to the weaker side or rear armour. This obviously isn't constantly viable, as SPA generally are very weakly armoured, some literally being guns on trucks, so even light machine gun fire can take them out, but if you play them sneakily they will reward you. Additionally, in the later tiers you can unlock anti-air platforms that have radar, giving you a lead indicator to assist with aiming, making them quite deadly and pretty satisfying to use too. Right, now that's out of the way, let's have a quick look at the tree overviews. So, to start off with as a footnote, the trees for all nations can't really be pigeonholed into a particular playstyle, despite what some people on here might try and tell you. There's a lot of variation in the trees, but some things granted are notably consistent. Also, sorry if this segment is a little bit inconsistent. I've rewritten it about 4 times just to cut down on the length, so it might waver on detail here and there. So, without contributing to that any further, let's start from what to expect from the US tree. The US tree is possibly my most favourite tank tree in the game. It takes a bit of getting used to and has a few tricky vehicles here and there, but ultimately it has some of the most varied lineups at every tier and a lot of great and just fun vehicles. The tree starts with some great examples, the Stuarts. They're quick, armoured to a degree with a fast firing gun and 4 crew, which really helps its survivability compared to some of the other tanks at reserve tier. Next of note are the early Shermans, which are very good. The M4A1 and M4A2 are very capable tanks and are complemented well with the M10, which has the great 76mm cannon found on the later Shermans, and at 3.7 it can do a lot of work. Next we have some great heavy tanks in the Sherman Jumbo, which is almost frontally impenetrable by most things at its tier, apart from a couple of weak spots. This one can wipe out teams if it's used right. Along with this you have the less armoured but upgunned M6A1. This gets the powerful 76mm as well as a secondary 37, which is surprisingly useful actually. You also get the first 76 Sherman at this tier as well. Next is the introduction of the Hellcat, which is an incredibly potent vehicle if used right. It can take spots early game and works great well above its tier as well, but make sure to flank with it. Don't just take it right into the middle of the battle or you won't really have a great time. Next we have 5.7, which is a really good tier for the US. For their heavy, they have the 76 Jumbo, which works great at 5.7. As well as this, there's the T25 and the M36 Jackson, which both have the 90mm gun, which is honestly one of the best guns in the game. You have the T25 for brawling, and the Jackson for more snipey, flanky tactics. It really is a good lineup. The next big one is 6.7, which has incredible potential. You have loads of light options in the Scorpion, Ontos or T92, a very powerful heavy in the T34, and the pretty decent backup of the M26 Pershing. After this though, there aren't really many great lineups, just good vehicles. The T32s, T95, M103 and T95U1 are great, but that's all you really get that excels until you get to the top tier with the 2 Abrams that we have currently. As for premiums, I don't recommend buying right into top tier, as if you're new to the game you simply won't be able to compete with that tier, especially at 9.0. You also have no lineup to back the tank up, which is a massive detriment in RB and severely limits your earning potential in AB. If you have the money to put in, I'd recommend getting 1 tier 3 premium and 1 tier 4 premium or talisman, and finally talismaning a tier 5, as in the long run you'll save a lot of money. Getting one premium vehicle you enjoy is great for grinding, and especially for grinding Lions, which we'll need a lot of. Luckily the US has some fantastic tier 3 premiums in the Cobra King, T20 and M18 Black Cat, and there's a lot of variation there too. The Hellcat is a fantastic flanker, works great in an up tier and can be very dangerous if used right. The Jumbo is one of the best tanks in the game when it's top tier. On the flip side though, it falls a little bit short when it's at the bottom in 5.7 games, where you're against Tigers, Panthers, IS-2s, so it's not really the most versatile, but pays off on the right map and BR. The T20 is my favourite here and probably one of the best tanks in the game. You have great mobility, great gun, and for a medium tank, great armour, and it also gets a short stabiliser as well. This would be my ultimate pick just because of the versatility, but if you're less confident with the game, I'd probably go with the Jumbo. For tier 4, I'd say Talisman, the T25, 76 Jumbo or Pershing. For premiums, the T29 is probably your best bet as it's pretty easy to use, has an amazing gun and pretty great armour. I really recommend this one. For tier 5, I'd consider talismaning the T32E1 and the M103, as they're both really good heavies that work in a lot of situations, meaning that their profit is generally going to be pretty high. Overall, the US tree's main benefit is versatility at almost all tiers. Once you get the hang of the game and the maps, you'll quickly find a vehicle for every occasion here. So there's a lot to look at in the US tree. Now on to Germany. Germany is a great tech tree full of a lot of fun vehicles all over the place. They also have the benefit of a lot of tanks with similar playstyles. Up to tier 4, most of the vehicle types play very similarly, probably because they naturally progress from early to late versions of the same or similar tanks. Panzer IVs, Stugs, Tigers, the tank destroyers, etc. So Germany is quite beginner friendly in that regard. The majority of their tanks have great guns, good armour, but not a lot of mobility, and this is relatively consistent until we get to the post-war tanks. The early tiers start out amazingly, and Germany probably have some of the most strongest tier 1 tanks in the game, if not the strongest. They have the Panzer IIs, which are amazingly forgiving. They may only have a 20mm, but they get HVAP belts, which deny the armour of almost all 1.0 tanks, while still being quite fast as well. Additionally, they get the early Panzer IVs, the C and the E, which get a great APHE round and heat as well, meaning they have absolutely no trouble with pretty much anything. They might not have the armour to stop most guns, but as they have 5 crew spread out quite nicely around the tank, and most of the tanks they're fighting use quite small AP rounds, taking the tank out in a few shots is pretty difficult. They also get the Flak Panzer and the Gepard SPA, which may again only have 20mm but can easily dispatch most tanks they see with the autocannon. Germany has 2 tank destroyer lines, a light TD line and a armoured TD line, and both are pretty good. The light line kicks off really well with the Puma, which is a really quick light tank and is definitely one to go for. The Marders as well are good to have as backups for the higher tiers as they have great guns, no armour, but that doesn't really matter if you're up tiering them. After that is the 88 Flak Truck, which is pretty fun. It's a fast firing 88 and the first German 88mm you can play. Downside is it can be hull broken, and due to its size this can be a bit of a problem. For the armoured TDs in Tier 2 we have the best of the famous Stugs, the F and the G. Both have great guns and do pretty well at their respective BRs. Though the real highlight of Tier 2 is in the medium tanks, especially the Panzer IV F2. This has the powerful German 75, which you'll be seeing a fair bit of. The armour isn't great, but you can penetrate absolutely everything you see. You can use this one all the way up to 5.7 and still not really have too much trouble penetrating other tanks. Additionally, the Panzer IIIs here, the M and the L, are pretty decent too. The armour is better than the Panzer IV, but they only have a 50mm gun, which isn't quite as effective. They're a good compromise though, and still work well at the tier. Tier 3 is where it really starts kicking off though. We get the Tiger and the Panther here, which is great, but the battle rating does start to get a little bit skewed, as you can see. The Tiger isn't connected, so you could, if you wanted, go from 3.3 battle rating to 5.7, which isn't really a good idea. The earlier tanks in Tier 3 though are pretty great. The tank destroyers are mostly fantastic, the lightly armoured Dicker Max and Nashorn do great and have incredibly potent guns at the tier, and because of this they can fit nicely into basically any lineup. The Stirrer is one to avoid though, as sure the gun is great, but the reload and mobility leaves something to be desired. On the armoured side, all options are pretty great. The Hetzer and Jagdpanzer work really well, decently armoured with good guns, and the 470 following the same trend. Also here are the Wirbelwind and Ostwind, which are some of the best AA in the game. Tier 4 is pretty great, with some fantastic heavy tanks and tank destroyers and some good middle ground in the Panthers. The main lineups here are 6.3 and 6.7, which both work really great, as the 6.3s are in no way outclassed at 6.7. The Tiger 2H, Panther A, Ferdinand and Jagdpanther are the standout vehicles here. Tier 5 is pretty nicely varied, with 7.0 and 7.7 being the best lineups. 7.0 has the Tiger 105, the Jagdtiger, Panther 2 and the Kugelblitz, which cover pretty much all angles. They do also get the JPZ-45, which functions a little bit like the light tank, but it's not really that great. For 7.7 we get the Leo 1 and the Maus, both of which aren't the easiest to use but are very, very capable once you get the hang of how they work. For Tier 6 we again get some great options. All of the tanks bar a few, like the Hot and the Begleitpanzer, play pretty much the same, fast and with good guns but with little armour, though the 2K and Leo 2A4 are hardly easy to kill. The top tier is only really going to be consisting of the 2A4, the 2K, the Gepard and the Hot, and either the TAM, KBZ-70 or the Leo A1A1. There's lots of options for versatility here. The 2A4 isn't really as easy to use as the Abrams, but the gun is a lot better, and still has amazing mobility and comparatively decent armour. Top tier Germany functions very well. As for premiums, there's quite a few good options. Like the US though, I would not recommend buying into the highest option, the Leo L44. It's not an amazing vehicle really, sure it gets the powerful 120mm gun, but that's really it. It's averagely mobile at the tier with no armour to speak of. This is probably the worst premium you can buy relative to the price here. Tier 4 has better options for premiums. The premium Jagdpanther and Tiger 2H are brilliant. The former is basically an exact copy, while the Tiger has extra track armour on the turret, a slightly better engine and an extra MG. The IU-251 as well is a really good light tank, but not really one I'd recommend for a beginner. As for the low tier premiums, I'd recommend the captured T-34, which is one of the best tanks in the game, the Command Panzer IV for its versatility, and the Aufklärungspanzer 141. For talismans, I'd say probably the Maus, Jagdpanther and Panzer IV-G are the safest bets. Russia has some incredible vehicles across all types, but they mainly excel in their versatile mediums and strong heavies. The tree doesn't start out amazingly strong. The T-26s aren't really very good and get outclassed by almost all other 1.0 tanks, but the BT series is pretty good. No armour but very, very good mobility and a pretty decent gun. The T-50 as well here is a really, really good tank at 2.7, there isn't really much that can scratch it. For Tier 2, a lot more options open up. The tank destroyer line is still a little bit weak apart from the ZIS-30, which can be pretty fun, but we start really seeing the early T-34s here, which are incredible tanks, and again, really beginner friendly. They're really mobile, decently armoured for what they are, and have very good guns. All of the early 76mm T-34s work great. We also see the KV series pop up here, which again are fantastic. At 3.7, the KV-1 completes the lineup really well, and the two that follow, the ZIS-5 and the S, are also amazing. The AA as well starts getting better here in the BTR and the 94KM. For anti-air purposes, these are the two best anti-air you're really going to be getting until top tier. Tier 3 offers some pretty great vehicles, and the tank destroyers briefly start getting good here again too. Chiefly the SU-85 and the 85M. The latter is really underappreciated, and I recommend putting it in your 5.7 lineup when you get there, along with the brilliant T-3485 D5T and the IS-1. You also get some of the more memey vehicles here, the famous KV-2 and the ASU-57. As far as the meta goes, they're not super functional, but are definitely good fun. Tier 4 is a pretty good 5.7 lineup. The IS-2 and T-3485 create a good backbone, with support from the D5T and IS-1. 6.3 is where it's really at though, with the T-44, IS-2 Mod 44 and the SC-100, with all manner of backups. There are also a fair few tricky vehicles in Tier 4 too. Basically all the tank destroyers apart from the SC-100 aren't really worth your time. In Tier 5, 7.3 and 7.7 is pretty good. Pretty much all the tanks here are decent, but the real standout ones are the IS-4M and the T-54s, all of which are great, but especially the first one here, the 1947 modification. The BMP-1 and 2 are pretty great here as well. Tier 6 again is full of pretty good options. For 8.3 you've got the T-10M, T-62, T-55, Object 906 and the Shilka, all of which are pretty great. The final three MBTs are pretty enjoyable. The first one isn't that great now though, it's comparatively quite slow with pretty weak armour, but the T-64B and the T-80 are brilliant. The B gets the BV ERA package, which really helps, and the T-80 gets a similar one too. The T-80 as well is the only one with a reverse gear. The others are stuck with a 4km/h reverse, which at top tier with all the hypermobile competition really does make them suffer. The T-80 though is worth it. Russia's top tier is pretty brawly. They're hard to kill from the front, certainly in one shot, as the places they can only really be penetrated is the breech or the lower plate, which rarely knock the tank out after a single round. They're also equipped with a fixed 7.1 second reload in the autoloader, which means they don't suffer after losing a crew member like most of the other tanks. As for premiums, there's not really many amazing ones fit for grinding, but the IS-6 and T-3485 are probably the best option. The Object 120 has probably the best gun in the game, but doesn't really have any armour at all, and on top of that it's massive, so as a beginner this isn't really the best choice. The T-55AM is a bit easier to use, but again I wouldn't really recommend going straight for a high tier premium. I'd honestly focus on talismans for this tree. The early T-34s, IS-2, T-3485, all of these are brilliant tanks to tally. If you can afford it though, I'd pop a tally on the T-54 Mod 47 as it has a great lineup and is easily one of the best tanks in the game. It's a really cheap way to research Tier 6 too. Next is the UK, which in all honesty isn't too beginner friendly. Apart from a rare few tanks, the British aren't equipped with any APHE rounds and only have solid shot, which, don't get me wrong, is still super functional but definitely isn't as easy as the other nations, as I'll need to know a little bit more about the tanks we'll be fighting in order to dissect the crew. I really wouldn't recommend starting out with them, but as their tanks go, they've got a fair few good ones. Tier 1 is nothing really too special. The reserve tanks are okay, not amazing. The good vehicles start popping up at 2.3 and above with the Crusader Mark 2 and 3. They're pretty great, the latter having the 57mm, which at 2.7 is fantastic. The first main lineup though is at 3.0. You get two Valentines, both are pretty good with 57 and 75mm guns, and then the very armoured Churchill Mark 1 and the very well armoured Churchill gun carrier. Next we have the Cromwells, which are pretty enjoyable again, equipped with the 57 and 75. Following the Cromwells, currently it's the only mainline tank in the tree with APHE, the Sherman, which is pretty refreshing. The AA we get around this BR2, the AC Mark II and the Crusader AA Mark II are both pretty good and probably the best option for anti-air until 7.7. The next good lineup is 4.0, with the Churchill Mark III and the Achilles with the famous 17-pounder, as well as the Cromwells for backup. One of the strongest lineups though is 4.7 with the Firefly, Avenger and Churchill Mark VII, and also the Crusader Mark I AA, which functions a little bit more than a light tank and less like an SPAA. There aren't really many great tanks after this for a while. The Comet and the Centurion Mark I are pretty fantastic though. The Comet is also the first tank BR-wise to get access to Sabo. The Centurion after it is a pretty powerful tank, but it just doesn't have the lineup available to really make it excel. Where Britain really start to stand out though is at 6.7, where you have the Centurion Mark III, FV4202, Tortoise, and even the FV4005 if you like. The former tanks all work great and are still really functional at 7.7 up tiers too. The Cent, Carnarvon, 4202 all have the 20 pounder which has great AP and Sabo, and they also all have stabilizers which at 6.7 is a really great asset. This is probably where the UK does the best. The effectiveness at tier 5 and upwards is patchy at best. 7.0 is pretty good, the Cent Mark 10, Vickers and Conway all offer something useful, but the lineup is brought down a little bit by the lack of SPA. Tier 5 also is let down on a whole due to the lack of any substance between 7.0 and 8.0, as they only really have the Conqueror, which is good but suffers on its own, and the Falcon AA at 7.7, which can't really main a lineup. The last time it really gets good is 8.3 with the Chieftain Mark III, the Warrior, and the Striker or Swingfire, along with the Chieftain Marksman. Above this, the only decent tanks really are the Chieftain and the Challenger. The Challenger is a great vehicle in real life, but not so much in game, as the meta of really fast tanks leaves the Challenger out a bit. It just doesn't compare to the Leo, Abrams and T-80. It also lacks substantial backups as well. The Chieftain is good but not really good enough to deal with the other top tier tanks. As for premiums, there aren't really many. Most of the ones I have here are event tanks or gift premiums that aren't really available anymore. The best ones you can buy though are the AC Mark IV and the STRV. This is a Centurion Mark III but with 3 early ATGM strapped to it. I'd almost recommend this one as the lineup fits into it so well, but as it's a tier 4 and can't really research tier 6, it isn't really the best choice. The Cent AVRE is a really fun tank for sure, but it's just not really a viable grinder as it's so hard to aim the gun for a beginner. The shell travels at about a quarter of the speed of contemporary guns and can make for quite a frustrating experience on some maps. For talismans though, I'd recommend the Churchill Mark 7 or the Centurion Mark III or any of the 6.7s really. Next is Japan, which is easily the least flushed out of all the tank trees. It has a few shining stars, but ultimately it's sadly pretty disappointing. The starter tanks are very poor. The Hargo isn't terrible, but pretty lackluster compared to the other machines, and the Igo Ko should be ignored entirely. It's not really that fun to use. The Ho-Ro though is great fun. The HE and APHE decimate any tank you see, and even high tier tanks too. But in my opinion, the best of Japan comes in tier 2 and 3. The later tiers just don't really have any lineups as they're so sparse. However, the Hori production and the top tier Type 90 are very good tanks. The others though fall very short. For the mid tiers though, the Chi-He, Cheeto and Chi-Ri are fantastic machines. The Chi-He has a great gun and survivability for the tier. The Cheeto has one of my favourite guns in the game, the 75mm, which is absolutely incredible, and the Chi-Ri uses the same gun but gets an autoloader, which makes for some pretty fun engagements. Tier 4 though is where it really starts to fall apart, as the STAs and Type 61 just don't really cut it. The higher tiers are a bit sparse too, containing only 3 effective tanks, the STB, Type 74 and Type 90. The STB is basically a Leo 1 with a stabilizer, the Type 74 is basically the same thing but with a dart round. The Type 90 though is pretty on par with the Abrams. It gets a very good round and a 5-second autoloader. Super quick and pretty survivable too. The downside though is that it only gets 3 crew, but it's still fantastic. For premiums, I'd easily this time go with the Chi-Nu 2. It's one of the best tanks in the game. The gun demolishes absolutely everything it meets at 3.7. This tank has a round that can pen 155mm of armor at 10 meters. That's unparalleled almost. I really recommend this one. The Hori prototype is great as well. Great gun, great armor, really fun machine to use. Sadly though, tier 5 doesn't really have many great options for talismans. The only thing really is the STB, as it does get a full stabilizer, but the reload is a little bit poor for the tier. But sadly, this is really the only option if you're dead set on getting the Type 90. Italy is just a quick mention here, as it currently doesn't have a full tank tree and only these 2 premiums. But hopefully it'll get one in the next patch though, so I just thought I'd mention it, and there will be an Italian tech tree soon. France is definitely the hardest nation to start, as they easily have the worst tier 1 of any nation by far. The main 4 here all use a terrible low penning APCR round and only have 2 crew. On top of this they're really slow as well, so no real redeeming factors at all. The only one that's semi-decent is the AMC 34YR reserve tank, which does get a decent APHE round. If I were you, I'd stick with this one until you can get to tier 2. There's a couple of alright tanks here. The The Char B1 and the AMC 35 make for a good pair and work pretty well, as do the Sherman and M10 at 3.7. Tier 3 though does have some better choices. You get a Jumbo and the SA-50 Sherman, which is a bit like a Firefly with more power in the gun but offset with a worse reload. You can also fit the AMX-13 SPAA into this lineup too. Tier 4 is really where it starts getting good though, and at 6.7 is the sweet spot. You get the Batchat, Lorraine 40T and the AMX M4. The Lorraine is one of the best tanks in the game with a really powerful AP round with just a 4-second reload, though this does only last until the autoloader drum is expended. The M4 is a heavily armoured medium with an autoloading 90 at the same once on the Batchat and functions a little bit like a heavy. All in all, this lineup is probably the strongest. For Tier 5, 7.3 is a good spot. You get the AMX-30, AMX-30-90 and the Foch, which all work really well and offer a nice window of versatility. The AMX-30 is a lot like a Leopard but with less ammo options, and at 7.3 it's honestly really good. The Foch as well is a tank I really like. It has the M103's 120mm gun but only gets AP. It's frontally immune to almost everything apart from heat, which makes it a really dangerous tank at its PR. At 8.0 and 8.3 we have the AMX-50, that word, and the AMX-30B2, which is equipped with APF SDS. The AMX-50, like the Foch, has a 120mm gun with a 6-second reload on the autoloader with a 19-shot clip. Its armour isn't really that great though and can easily be taken out with a well-placed shot, but it can really do some damage in the right location. Also at this tier we get the AMX-30 DCA, which does the job of top tier SPA really well. After this though, the tree falls apart a little bit. The top tier AMX-40 is good, but only really when it's spaded. It gets arguably the best APF SDS round in the game, but it is a tier 4 modification, so it's a really long slog to actually get it. Apart from the gun, compared to other top tiers, it's arguably the weakest. It has no armour to speak of, average mobility, and on top of this, there's no real decent backups to take out of the tier. The AMX-30s are good, the Brennus and the B2, but they have no armour, aren't too quick, and most importantly don't have stabilisers, so they really can't compete with other tanks at the tier. They do make for decent snipers though, but they really lack the versatility to be effective. Right, that's the trees out of the way. Next we'll have a look at how to best structure your lineups. Having a good lineup is very important to how you perform, to the point where having a bad one can actually put a hard limit on how effective you can actually be. This is most prevalent in RB as the matches are quite dynamic depending on the map, nations participating and the BR you're playing at. You're going to want to react to things happening by spawning to counter what the enemy team is doing, and the more varied vehicles you have, the easier that's going to be. Without gold, you start with 5 crew slots for every nation that you can buy for Silver Lions, though the 6th slot is only about 200 GE, which is well worth getting in my opinion. Ideally, you'll have 6 crew slots. Now you're likely not going to be able to respawn 5 or even 6 times, but having the option of 5 or 6 different vehicles to choose from is the important thing here. Firstly, I can't really tell you what the best possible lineup is overall, as each BR and nation have many different possible variations, but I can go into what I personally use in all my lineups if I can. So first off, you're going to ideally want about 2 to 3 universal tanks, and by this I mean tanks that work well on every map with some variation between them to suit the BR and the particular map you get. These are generally medium tanks with the occasional heavy and tank destroyer depending on the BR. These tanks are quite important as well mid to late game as a fallback. Then you're going to want at least 1 SPA and 1 plane, ideally a fighter bomber. 3 things I like to have in all my lineups first and foremost are a good flanking tank for big maps. This is usually a light tank or a quick medium, and a tank that works incredibly well when it's top tier, something like the Jumbo or IS-1. And also something inexpensive but effective for top tiers. This is something like a glass cannon, a tank which has armour that isn't effective, but the gun is. Let's take the M50 ONTOS as an example. No armour, decent mobility, but great firepower. So as it's 6.7, in a 7.7 up tier it's only going to cost 90 out of your 450 spawn points, while still having the weaponry to frontally kill almost any tank you'll fight. Having a tank like this is really important in your lineups. Something to always avoid is by having an unbalanced lineup battle rating wise. Now as an example, let's look at Germany with the Tiger 1. The Tiger is tier 3 and you can start researching it as soon as you unlock tier 3. The problem with this is that it's 5.7 and can be the first tank you unlock at this rank, and if it is, then because hey, the allure of the Tiger is certainly strong, your lineup could consist of one 5.7 and then everything else 4.0 and below, and obviously this isn't going to suit you very well. Because sure, your first spawn in the Tiger won't be too bad, but then the backup spawns aren't really going to be effective at all, especially at an up tier at 6.7. If you plan on playing RB, working through the tree in sequence of battle rating is really the best way to go for making versatile, structured lineups. But honestly, when it comes down to it, just having tanks who enjoy playing in your lineups is the most important thing. If you enjoy playing it, you're likely going to do well in it. It also depends on what you're good at. If you're a good pilot, why not add an extra plane? If you like flanking, pop another light tank in there. It's all up to you. But having good structured lineups won't hurt and will make you very deceptively effective on the battlefield, much more effective than someone that has an unbalanced lineup. So, first and probably the most important one out of all of these is ultimately just the most effective way to take out a tank. Obviously this can't apply to all vehicles as they're all really different, but I'll go through some tips on how to best tackle your opponents. So, like I mentioned earlier, the way to take out a tank is to knock out the crew so there's none or one left, or blow up the ammo or fuel. The most reliable way in most cases is to aim to take out the tank's crew and not go for the ammo, as there is a chance the ammo won't detonate. So, if you can penetrate the tank you're fighting reliably, go for the crew in almost all cases. If you can't penetrate the tank you're fighting reliably, there's a few little tactics you can use. The main one is shooting for a tank's barrel so it can't fire back, allowing you to flank or take your time to aim for a particular weak spot, but of course this is only really viable at close range. At long range, if you aren't spotted and you're looking at a tank that you're not sure you can penetrate, just bide your time. Wait until you have a clear shot or they present the side armour, and make sure you're in cover before you engage. You're never going to want to engage out in the open. If you're shooting a tank in the side though, it helps to know about the vehicle you're engaging before firing. For turretless tanks, shooting them in the engine is generally the best bet, that way they can't fire back while they're knocking them out. Shooting them centre mass, especially with APHE, is usually a one shot, but if you're using a weaker gun or just want to secure the kill, the engine is the way to go for sure. Additionally, this is also relevant to tanks with turrets too, and it helps to do some research on the tanks you'll be fighting, as in this case, some of them have very slow turret traverse. So, you could shoot a tank with a turret in the engine and be secure in knowing you'll be able to fire again before they can swing their gun around on you. If a tank is facing away from you, going for the engine again is a good bet, provided they don't have a very quick turret. This way the tank is stuck, and your second shot can be used to go into the turret to make sure there's no way they can return fire, and then you can just dispatch them as you please. If you were to just shoot into the back of the turret, they could be able to drive away into cover or swing round, presenting the tougher frontal armour to you, making them a bit more tricky to take out. From the front, ideally you're going to want to disable a tank's driver and gunner in the same shot, but if that's not viable, always prioritise the gunner. To get good at this, it's a good idea to look at the tanks in the X-ray viewer to see where the particular crew members are. Usually the gunner sits on the same side of the tank as the driver, but always best to check as this isn't consistent across all nations. The best way to combat tanks often falls on your available rounds as well. For tanks with APHE, shooting centre mass from the front or the side will usually be a consistent one-shot, provided you can penetrate the tank's armour. Though this isn't the case with AP, Sabo or APCR in the side though, as damage is in a cone, so if you shoot under a tank's turret with AP, the driver and machine gunner will survive, provided the tank actually has these crew members. Using these rounds from the side is a safe bet to fire at the tank's breach so it can't fire back, as you can't always guarantee a one-shot. From the front with AP rounds, shooting for the driver and gunner is usually the best bet, or centre mass if your caliber is high enough. Generally with these smaller caliber rounds, anything below 75mm, it's best to aim for the gunner first, then pick off the crew one by one, as the damage output just isn't high enough to reliably disable a tank in one shot. Next up is angling. Now this is a pretty common tactic in tank games, but for those of you who are new to the genre, I'll go through it here. Angling your armour is used to make it more effective. One of the best tanks to show this on is the KV-1. Front on, your armour is flat to the target and this makes it a lot easier to pen, but if you turn your hull like this, the armour becomes much more angled and gains a higher effective thickness, making it a lot harder to penetrate. But do be careful though, as not all tanks have enough side armour to do this effectively. If we take the Panther for example and angle the front plate, sure it gains effectiveness, but in doing so the side armour becomes a lot more vulnerable to penetration. As a rule of thumb, you should always angle your armour on most of your tanks, but do look at the tank beforehand. If it has weak side armour, angle less. If it has strong side armour, angle more. Next is a very important tool War Thunder gives you in the customization menu. This is your armour and X-ray viewer. Let's use the Tiger 1 as an example and look at the X-ray first. Using this we can see which of the crew members is which, where the ammo racks are, and the particulars of the engine, gun and drives. If we hover over them they display additional information. Let's look at the armour viewer. Here we can see the thickness of any piece of armour on the tank, the effective angle and type of armour. It's a great tool as well for seeing where the sweet spot is for angling. Additionally, under armor, there's an option here called Protection Analysis. By clicking this, we can select any tank in the game and select any shell it's equipped with and test the penetration at any range. This is a great tool for testing how effective your angling is, seeing how safe you are hull down, or just seeing what can actually pose a threat to you. It's well worth going back to from time to time, especially if you're struggling with a particular tank. Who knows, you might even find some hidden weak spots. Next is a pretty common tactic that can work pretty well, and that's baiting shots. All this entails is poking out a bit of your tank the enemy can't pen but might be tempted to shoot at. This mainly works on urban close quarters maps and with tanks that have quite strong front armour. It's best used by sticking your tank's angled front plate out from behind cover, moving around a little bit, and if the enemy tank is a newer player or just a bit impatient, they should eventually take a shot at you, allowing you to drive out and safely return fire. Also, you can use a tactic called side scraping. This is where you reverse out of cover, showing your heavily angled sides to the enemy and not your front plate. This usually tempts an enemy into firing at you again, but only reliably works if your tank has good side armour. It can take a while to get the angles right, but after some time with the game, you'll definitely pick it up easy. Next is something I think all new players are guilty of, myself definitely included, and that's to not take a full ammo load, as doing this will fill up all of your ammo racks in the tank, making you a lot more likely to get taken out by ammo detonation. As for the amount of rounds to take, it's ultimately up to you and heavily depends on the tank you're playing and how many rounds you generally fire. I personally take out around 30-ish rounds for most vehicles and normal reloads, and for tanks that fire quickly, anything from 40 to 50, but it is up to you. If you're finding you're finishing matches with a lot of ammo left over, take a few out. It might just save you from time to time. Next is a quick thing called Join in Progress. When you first start playing the game, you might have this option on by default. Basically, it speeds up the wait times for games by putting you into matches that have already started. While this does get you games quicker, it generally means you're going to be at a disadvantage when you play, especially in RB and Sim, as you're going to get to positions a lot slower than everyone else, and it might cause you unnecessary deaths. If you prefer to only join matches as they start, you can disable the option to JIP by going to Options, Common Battle Settings, and turning this slider off. It's up to you whether you want it on or not, but I personally recommend you switch it off, at least for RB and simulator modes. As you've probably noticed, a tank's internal modules and crew change colour depending on how much damage they've taken, from light yellow to red and then to black when they're taken out. This is especially important for gun barrels and breaches. When the barrel and breach are light yellow, they still function, but when they turn to orange and red, there's a very high chance the barrel will split, leaving it destroyed until you repair it. And as for the breach, if you fire with a damaged one, there's a very high chance the round will detonate inside your tank, knocking you out. It's important to keep this in mind while fighting tanks, as if you penetrate a tank's turret and turn the breach orange, you can pretty safely push them as they're probably not going to risk firing. Turning it lightly yellow though will still allow it to function normally. You can see the damage you've done on the indicator on the top right, so do keep an eye on it. As soon as you see the barrel or breach turn orange, you're likely safe. There is a chance they'll still get the shot off, but it is, to be honest, a very, very small one. Next is a bit of a little hidden tip, and that's the neutral transmission gear. Now you can't always see this option in controls, and it's a bit tricky to actually find it. To enable it, you need to go to Controls, Tank, and right at the top there's a slider here for Automatic Transmission. Turn it off and this option will appear below, Transmission Gear Neutral. Set a key for it and you're good to go, but make sure to turn automatic transmission back on after. What this does, without getting technical, is allow you to engage your reverse quicker. If you drive forward and hit your reverse, your tank will usually halt briefly before actually reversing. If you engage the neutral transmission gear then reverse though, the halt is removed, allowing your tank's reverse to kick in sooner. This can be useful in quite a few situations, like if you're driving around a corner, see an enemy tank you'd rather not engage, this might help you slip away just in the nick of time. It does take a bit of getting used to though, but it can really help you in the right situation. Next is a few pointers for using smoke. Some tanks have one-time use smoke grenades that fire in sequence or all together, and some have smoke rounds. Smoke has many good uses offensively and defensively. One good use for it is shooting directly at tanks that are giving you trouble, say there's something heavily armoured, sniping or locking down a road. If you fire smoke directly at the tank, there's nothing it can really do. It can't fire back with any accuracy, and in the 25 seconds or so the smoke screen is around for, it can't see what you're doing either, so you could take this time to flank it or get out of the line of sight. It's also good for shutting down sightlines in general or locking down caps. If you smoke a cap point in sight of enemies, you'll likely be able to capture it before the smoke clears. Additionally, smoking choke points in lanes will slow the enemy down, as they're likely not going to want to drive out of smoke, as you or your team will be able to shoot them first. It works great defensively as well. So you have roof mounted smoke grenades and you get your breach taken out, well, you can pop smoke and hide in it while you repair. Best not to just reverse slowly and stop though, as enemies will predict this. Pop your smoke, reverse a bit, and then drive to the left or right, or just be random in a way they can't predict. This isn't going to work every time, but the success rate, at least for me, is pretty decent. The main way I use my smoke, and the way I think it works most consistently, is using it preemptively. So rather than popping your smoke down on a path you're getting flanked on, it's better to pop it down on a path you could get flanked on, as an enemy likely won't want to drive blind into the smoke. And even if they do, again, you'll probably see them emerging before they see you. Another good use is if you're near the enemy's spawn, or you need to just turn away from the direction of the spawn, smoking a retreat has the same effect, and will likely save you from getting shot in the back a lot. One of the most important tools you constantly have at your disposal in RB is your third-person camera. I cannot stress enough how important it is to look at your surroundings constantly, watching ridge lines and using your binoculars to scope out spots tanks could be in. Being aware of where you are and where the enemy tanks could be is one of the most pivotal factors in staying alive. Additionally, before you drive around a corner, make sure to use the camera to peek around without showing your tank. It might just save your life. But as well, definitely get into the habit of looking around generally with a free camera button, which should be the C key. Doing it this way keeps your gun pointed forwards. If you were to look around without this key, your gun would follow where you were looking at, and you're not going to want your gun following your view if you're looking behind you, as you might drive right into a tank you could have otherwise taken out. So, keep your eyes peeled. Always. Next is your rangefinder, which can be quite a useful tool, but only if used correctly and in moderation. All vehicles in game can use the rangefinder to some capacity. On an expert crew with rangefinding skill maxed, a tank can rangefind to just under 1,200 meters. Some vehicles though get rangefinder modifications, and these come in the form of regular rangefinders and laser rangefinders. The regular rangefinder can rangefind to about 2,200 meters, while the laser is around 5,000. Additionally, tanks with rangefinder modifications acquire the range much quicker. The rangefinder is best used while sniping at tanks at range that aren't aware of you. If you get into the habit of rangefinding everything, 1, you'll never learn the ranges yourself if you fall into the crutch of the rangefinder, and 2, while you're rangefinding, the tank you're aiming at could move, wasting time, or fire back at you. So it's important not to get into a habit of using it all the time and only when you need to. Next is a pretty useful tactic regarding the use of binoculars. The binos generally are great anyway, as they let you zoom in a lot further than your gun sight and at a higher elevation, so behind a ridge, using your binos you can likely see over it. But the main thing here is using your binos to aim. Now this is great for a few reasons. Firstly, it saves time, so by pointing at a tank in the bino view and clicking, it saves having to exit the view and move your gun manually, which you could lose crucial time needing to take out the tank you spotted, as it could well move out of sight or even fire back at you. Additionally, you can fire in this mode too. If you aim at a tank, or just above it if it's at range, and exit the bino view while still holding the fire button, you'll shoot instantly at exactly where you are pointing. Now this can be useful for quick shots, or by shooting things through soft cover, or just by shooting over ridges. Now it's a pretty good habit to get into using if you get the hang of it. Next is a quick little tip for auto-loading tanks, so mainly one for the French players here. Auto-loaders have a set amount of rounds in the drum, and after a few seconds of not firing, another round will slowly be loaded into the drum, or if all of the ammo in one is completely expended. But there's a way to reload them a bit quicker, and that's if you sit on a cap point. Sitting on a cap point in general replenishes your ammo, but for auto-loaders, it replenishes the ammo right into the drum at a faster rate, and that's alongside your crew putting ammo already into the drum, so you essentially get 2 rounds at once. It's always worth getting your ammo back so you don't get caught out with no ammo down the line. Possibly the most important thing about getting good at ground forces is learning maps and forming a general plan of where to go on each one depending on the vehicle you're using, learning the sight lines, sniping spots, and working out where to sit to limit the chance of being flanked. The main thing to keep in mind while playing when you're new is passively limiting the directions you can be shot from. This mindset will help you a lot and keep you out of trouble while you're learning the maps. So in this sense, the ideal place to be is in between 2 parts of solid cover to your sides. If you can anticipate enemies only coming from in front or behind, you'll have an easier time reacting to enemy vehicles than if you were in the open. It limits the amount of looking around you'll need to do as well, as you'll only really be focusing in front of you. Now, of course you can't do this on all maps because some are just too open, but on these maps, find ridge lines, stick with your team, and you'll find good spots in no time. But even if you can cover one angle of your vehicle with solid cover, you're on the right track. Playing somewhat safely like this until you get a good feel for the maps is the way to go in my opinion. Another type of playing is flanking, and this obviously is mainly reserved for the lighter, faster vehicles. Flanking doesn't really mean hugging the edge of the map though, as this usually puts you too far out of the action or leaves you in the open for an enemy to catch you out. The best way to flank is using cover and hanging outside the bubble of the action in order to get to the side or behind the bulk of the enemy. Make sure to avoid the enemy spawns though, as enemies respawning will likely spot you, especially if you are the one who made them respawn. However though, some maps are almost a line or ring to the enemy spawn, so it's somewhat unavoidable on maps like Advance to the Rhine or Sinai, where the flank will just take you to the spawn. Another point is to avoid the spawns in general, as if you get close, you'll appear as a solid marker on the enemy's minimap. So, no matter where they all are, every single member of the enemy team can see exactly what type of tank you're in, and exactly where you are. Another thing to keep in mind if you plan on sniping, hanging back or covering a sightline is plays you take out coming back for revenge. If you're in a good campy spot, covering a part of the map, an enemy will come back prepared to fire at you or flank you if possible. Additionally, you could be marked on the map as well, making everyone aware of you. Another thing to keep in mind is if you're in an open-topped or lightly armoured vehicle, the player you took out could easily come back and strafe you if you stay put. So, the solution is to relocate after you've taken out a few tanks just to make sure no one comes back for you. You might not even need to move much. If you're behind a ridgeline for example, just move to another part of the ridge. The enemy tank coming back for you will probably just go for the spot you were at when they last saw you, allowing you to get the jump on them again. Just be wary your position might be compromised if you stay there too long. The final tip here is to use and pay close attention to the minimap, as when a tank is shot relatively close to you, it'll flash up on the map, allowing you to engage it easier than you would if you didn't know it was there. Also, by using the free cursor hotkey or by pressing M to look at the map, you can click anywhere on the map to draw attention to where an enemy is or where you think one could be. But in general, the minimap as well is a great tool to gauge where's safe and where enemies likely are, so keep your eye on it and it will definitely help you out. Lastly is sight distance control. This is useful for tanks with low velocity guns, or if you're covering a sight line at a set distance. To enable it, go to the bottom of miscellaneous in the tank section of controls, and I have it set up like this. So I'm holding down the left key and press up or down to move the sight. Make sure though to press relative control, otherwise when you let go the sight will return to normal. Also, lower the sensitivity a bit too, as it can be a bit finicky. This is great to use in tandem with rangefinders, but bear in mind it might not be exactly accurate. I personally don't use this much, but it's a good tool to have just in case you need it, especially with lower velocity guns like the German 150mm. So, there we have it. I hope some aspects of this video have helped you get to grips with the game a little bit better, and if you have any further questions, please feel free to put them in the comments or come over to my Discord if you want to have a chat about things a bit easier. Also, I'll be adding an FAQ in the description here as well for any good questions you leave in the comments that could possibly help out other players. Well, I think it's about time I wrap this up. I really hope you enjoy the game as much as I do. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye. Also, just a bit of an unscripted post-outro thing here. I do want to apologise for how long this video actually took. Not entirely my fault though. I've had quite a lot of PC problems as of late. After a power cut that I had a few months ago, I think my power supply has a power leak. I think that's what the problem is. As if the PC turns off, I can't turn it back on unless I kind of managed to like trip it on by accident, which is what's happening now. So it was out for about a month, so that took a long time. Additionally, I don't really make a lot of money. I don't really go into any details as to why, but right now I am unable to find a pretty conventional job. So the way I make money is through YouTube. I make a bit of money through YouTube, and also by selling old things from World War II and the post-war. So things like postcards, old photos, magazines, ephemera, stuff like that, like all framed, all make them look nice. And I make a little bit through that as well. And because of, I live on my own, I pay my own rent, pay bills, I need to get food and etc. I can't put a huge amount of time into videos like I hoped I would be able to, just because I can't really make enough and I need to prioritize other things. I want to keep living in this flat that I live in right now. So yeah, I want to apologise for that, and hopefully along the line, if this channel becomes super popular, I'll be able to make these a lot more frequently, and I really want to because it's something I enjoy doing a lot more than anything else. So, thank you for sticking with me, and again, I am sorry for how long this took. Additionally, if you'd like to support a little bit more than just giving a view or leaving a comment, I have put a PayPal link down below if any of you would like to donate to just help me out a little bit. Obviously, not required whatsoever, and I don't mind either way. It's just if you really want to, the option's there. If not, no worries at all. Also, if your man cave is in need of anything interesting on the walls, like old photos, old documents, old magazines, anything like that to do with aircraft or tanks, feel free to PM me on Discord and I'll show you the things I've got and maybe sell you something. Who knows? Yeah, anyway, thank you again for watching. Thank you for listening to me have a bit of a ramble at the end here. And yeah, I certainly hope the next video comes along a lot quicker than this one did. So yeah, thank you for bearing with me, guys, as I really do appreciate it. Also, though, bit of exciting news. I've started a podcast with Slickbee and Kath. We're doing that every Sunday at about 5:30. It'll be streamed live and then hosted on Slick's channel. And if you want to see more of me talking about nonsense in between these videos, feel free to give that a watch. Currently, it is all War Thunder based, so all stuff about the game, upcoming news, just different topics like that. So yeah, give it a watch and let me know what you think. I'm going to stop talking now. Have a good morning, afternoon, night, and I will see you next time. Goodbye for real this time.